Z5. I think these apply across a lot of the Z cameras. Some of the functions may or may not be there depending on which camera you've got. I mean, the Z9 has probably got a lot more functions, but let's start with these today. So we're in the autofocus menu to begin with, and as you can see, the first thing up on here is your priority selection. So you got a separate one for autofocus continuous or single, and the idea is that this will tell the camera when to take the picture. So is it when you press the button, or is it when that image is in focus? So for these, I've got it set differently. So for continuous, I want to take the picture even though the focus may not be bang on, because that way I generally take a burst with those. So when that happens, I want those pictures, and then I can choose which one I think is most in focus. When it's a single one, there's not so much action. That's when I am taking a portrait or a landscape or something like that, and that's when I want to make sure things are in focus as the picture's taken. So that's where that one comes in. Next up is our focus tracking with lock on. So this is when you're tracking a subject, it's how sticky that tracking is really. So whether it will move quickly to find something else if what you're focusing on is blocked, or whether it will hold on for a moment and just allow it to come back into view, come back into focus. So I leave it towards the delayed end of things. Then you can choose what you want autofocus to look at. So on here I have got the option of face and eye, face, animal, or turning it off completely. So I've gone for face and eye detection for most things, and that is so that I've got the best chance. If it can find the eye, it will focus on the eye. If it can find the face, it will focus on the face. So it gives it that other option so that you can get more specific if you want to with the eye, but not necessarily needed. Animal detection, I keep this one on for the profile that I use to take pictures of Ruby, and the idea is that this will find an animal, like a cat or a dog, I think are the only options in this camera, and that is what it will focus on. So if there was a dog and a human, it would pick the dog. So that's what I use when I'm taking pictures of the dog. Now, if you want to control on the back of the camera, so on the back of the camera you have got a button to allow you to move around your focus points as you want to, and this will you can move them around the screen, and this will allow you to choose that focus position yourself. You can use either all of those points, or if you go into it, you can use every other point if you want to, which makes it quicker to move around, but you've got less options of where you actually want to focus, so not necessarily the best thing. You can store your focus points by orientation, and what that means is it takes a moment to get your head around, but basically you can fix a point on there, turn your camera whichever way you want, and it will stay in the same place. It won't move around the screen in relation to where you've turned your camera. It'll be fixed. So for example, if it's in the middle right of the frame, and when you're a landscape, you turn it portrait, it will be at either the top or the bottom, depending on which way you turn. I don't really see the need for that, so I keep that one turned off. And with AF activation, you've got options as to how to tell the camera that you want to use autofocus. So you can press the shutter button halfway down and that will activate it, or you can press the AF on button that you've got on the back of the camera, and that's how I like to have it set up, being able to use either of them. You've got the option of just that AF on button on the back, but I don't see the point in just using that. Depending on the situation, I prefer one or the other. If you don't want all of the options available for choosing the area that you want your AF to focus in, you can take some out of your menus. So you can just select or deselect these in their tick box. and it will give you more or less options. Generally speaking, it doesn't take too long to scroll between them, so I leave most of them selected. Focus wraparound points. This kind of comes back to when you're manually selecting where you want to focus. If you turn this on, you can scroll to the right of the screen and then it will reappear on the left hand side of the screen. If you don't have the wrap on, it will scroll to the right side of the screen and stop as if it's hit a brick wall. Some people prefer one, some people prefer the other, but I prefer it to keep going round much quicker than going back the other way. Along with focus points, you've got the focus point options. So what this means is you've got two sub options. You've got manual focus mode, and you can select whether the focus point that you're choosing is there all of the time or whether it's only while you're focusing. And in dynamic area AF assist, I'll show you that shortly, but it's whether you've got just the focus point that you are focusing on, or whether it's got the surrounding points to help with the autofocus. So I have both of those on. For low light AF, that's an on or an off, and basically what that means is that turning it on will help the camera focus more in low light situations, so it will allow the autofocus to work in slightly more challenging conditions. And something else that can help with low light performance of autofocus is the AF assist illumination, which is a green light on the front of the camera. It will light up while focusing, and that allows the camera to be a bit more accurate with its focusing. Next up is our metering and exposure menu. So these are more around how the camera decides what the exposure is for the picture. So when you're changing things like shutter speed, aperture, ISO, you can choose to have it in steps that are either a third of a stop or a half of a stop. So obviously a third will give you more options for dialing it in exactly how you want it, so that's what I've chosen on there. Easy exposure compensation. You know, I was talking about the exposure compensation button the other day, where you can increase or decrease your EV, and that was a simple press the button and turn the dial. That's because I've got this turned off. If you turn it on, then it's just a case of changing the dial to have that plus or minus from your standard exposure, or you can have it on, and each time you use it, it will auto reset back to 0 afterwards, so that when you come to take the next picture, it will be back in 0 and you won't forget to do it and be in with a bit of a surprise when you look at your picture at the end of it. Your center weighted area is the size around that central point that it will take into account when you're measuring the exposure, when the camera is measuring the exposure, I should say. Our next menu is the timers and AE lock. So what is AE? Auto exposure lock. So when would you want to lock your auto exposure? Would you like to lock it when you half press the button, so when you're focusing? Would you like to lock it when you fully press that button? So if you're taking multiple exposures, do you want to stop any changes in automatic exposure adjustments between pictures? That's where you choose that. Again, I have it off because I don't tend to use the auto exposure functions, so for me it doesn't really make any difference. I've got the control over that anyway. Next up is our self timer menu, and what this does is in here you can choose a time, you can choose a number of shots, and you can choose that interval between the shots so that you get those multiple exposures that you want to. So anywhere from 2 to 20 seconds. So you've got the options of 2, 5, 10 or 20 seconds, and you can have up to 9 shots, and your interval between those shots can be half a second, 1, 2 or 3 seconds. So it gives you a bit of flexibility if you're using that self timer, when it will occur, when and how many pictures will be taken at the time, which can be quite useful. Yesterday I was taking pictures at a family event, and we had a group picture at the end which I wanted to be in as well, as I'm part of the family. So camera on tripod, line everyone up, get everyone in the right places, make sure there's room in the frame for me as well, fix my exposure, my focus, and then put the self timer on so that it gives me time to come from behind the camera, join into the family group. And I always set multiple exposures, so I always set it to 9 so that by the time I get there, the first one's probably not going to be that good as we're all kind of jostling into place. But as you go along, and people aren't expecting to have so many pictures taken, so they relax a bit after that first one. Hopefully they stay there and they still keep smiling and looking at the camera, and that way you can make sure that you get a good picture out of it. Okay, so we're actually going to stop recording there for the moment and leave it as a slightly shorter video this week, because while I've been editing it, I've noticed that my iPhone, which was my main camera in this, mainly because I was using my Nikon in order to show you the menus, this actually stopped recording. There's a Nikon app which, when you start the camera and your phone is also on, it will automatically open that app. And this is what happened while I was recording a video, so it actually stopped the video to open that app, which is really kind of annoying, so I need to work out how to stop that happening. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments so that I can turn that one off. But what we'll do is we'll have a slightly shorter one today, and I think this is the more interesting menu, and then we're going to go on to look at the other ones next week. So we're going to take a little break here, and I will see you again next week when we go into some of the other menus and go into a bit more detail on the bits that we haven't looked at today. And that means that we'll spend a bit more time on it rather than rushing through it all in one go, or making you sit there for an hour to watch it all. So I hope you've enjoyed it today. Thank you for joining me on my journey. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. And I'll see you again next week for part 2 of the menu settings. Have a great week. Bye.